If I asked you to picture a cowboy meal, what would you see? Chances are, your mind instantly jumps to a dusty campfire, a blackened pot hanging over the flames, and inside, it's such a cliche that we barely think about it anymore. Cowboys and beans go together like spaghetti and meatballs, or peanut butter and jelly. But here's the real kicker. This wasn't just Hollywood myth-making. Cowboys really did eat beans. And not just occasionally, we ate them constantly. Which leads to the obvious question. Why beans? Why not steak sizzling over the fire every night? Or stacks of cornbread? Or hearty bowls of potatoes? The truth is way more interesting than you'd think. And by the time you finish this story, you'll see beans in a completely new light. Let's rewind to the 1870s, smack in the middle of the cattle boom.
Imagine you're a cowboy. You signed on for a cattle drive that will take weeks, maybe months. Every day you're in the saddle for 12, sometimes 14 hours, moving thousands of cattle across rivers, plains, and scrubland. The sun scorches by day, the nights are cold, and danger, whether it's stampedes, rustlers, or snakes, is never far away. Now, here's the catch. All that riding and roping burns through an unbelievable number of calories. We're talking 5,000 to 7,000 calories a day. Easy. That means food isn't just a comfort, it's fuel. Without steady meals, your strength gives out, and if you can't ride, you can't work. So, what do you eat? You can't exactly swing by the nearest diner or fast food joint. You're out on the open range, and everything you eat has to be hauled with you. That's where the chuck wagon comes in.
The chuck wagon was basically the cowboy version of a food truck, except instead of serving tacos in a city square, it followed the herd across the wilderness.
It carried flour, coffee, bacon, lard, maybe some dried fruit if the ranch was generous. And it carried beans, lots and lots of beans. This is where the story starts to take shape, because beans weren't just an option, they became the cornerstone of cowboy cuisine. So why beans? The answer is surprisingly simple, and yet it explains everything. Beans were cheap, they were easy to transport, they didn't spoil, and when cooked, they multiplied in size, meaning a single sack could feed a crew for weeks. Think about this. Meat was valuable but perishable. A side of beef might last a few days, maybe longer if salted or smoked, but eventually it went bad. Vegetables were out of the question. They wilted after a day or two in the heat. Bread was possible, but it required flour, yeast, and constant baking. Beans, on the other hand, were durable little nuggets of nutrition. And the nutritional profile. Honestly, beans were the cowboys' dream food. Packed with protein, rich in fiber, and full of calories that kept the man going from sunrise to sunset. In a world before protein bars or energy shakes, beans were the closest thing to cowboy fuel. You can almost imagine a ranch owner shrugging and saying,
Why spend a fortune on steak when beans do the job for a fraction of the cost?
And just like that, beans became the backbone of life on the trail. But here's the thing, just because beans were practical doesn't mean cowboys loved them. In fact, for many, beans were more cursed than blessing. Imagine eating the same dish for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, day after day, for weeks. The cook might throw in a bit of salt pork if supplies allowed, maybe stir in some dried chili or onions when available. But most of the time, beans were beans. And if you've ever eaten poorly cooked beans, you know what comes next. Cowboys joked about the musical side effects of their diet, but in reality, indigestion was no laughing matter. The beans weren't always soaked properly, and long rides didn't exactly help with digestion. Around the campfire, it was more than just smoke filling the air. Yet even with all the grumbling, beans stuck around. They had to. Without them, cowboys might not have made it through those grueling cattle drives at all. Let's get closer to the fire for a moment. Imagine a chuck wagon cook, known simply as Cookie. He's up before dawn, stoking the fire while the rest of the camp still snores. He throws beans into a pot, maybe with a slab of bacon or a pinch of whatever spices he can find, and lets them simmer all day. By the time the herd stops for the night, dinner is ready. Cowboys shuffle in, exhausted, dusty, half asleep, and they eat. No complaining too loudly, because everyone knows the cook holds the power. Cross him, and tomorrow's beans might taste suspiciously like ashes. But even the best cook can't disguise the monotony. Some cowboys wrote in letters home about missing simple things. A fresh apple, a loaf of bread, anything that wasn't beans. And yet, beans became more than just food. They became a ritual. After a long day, men gathered around the pot, swapping stories, singing songs, laughing at each other's expense. Beans were a constant, a reminder that no matter how hard the day, there will be something warm waiting at night. At this point, you might be wondering, couldn't they have chosen anything else? The answer is complicated. Cornmeal was common, and cowboys did eat plenty of biscuits, flapjacks, and cornbread. Bacon showed up too, though it was expensive and didn't stretch very far. But rice wasn't widely available in the West, and potatoes spoiled far too quickly. Dried beans, however, were cheap and already part of frontier diets thanks to Native American traditions and Mexican influence. In fact, the Cowboys' relationship with beans has deep roots. Vaqueros, the original Mexican cowboys, had been cooking beans over campfires long before cattle drives pushed north. Their traditions, from food to clothing to herding techniques, shaped cowboy culture in profound ways. So when American cowboys adopted beans, they weren't just choosing convenience, they were stepping into a culinary heritage. So what do beans really represent? On one level, they were about survival. But on another, they symbolized the shared hardships of cowboy life. Sitting around the fire with a tin plate of beans was a leveling experience. The ranch owner back in town might eat steak and pie, but on the trail, everyone rich or poor, seasoned hand or greenhorn ate from the same pot. Beans were the great equalizer. And in hindsight, that's part of why they became such a powerful symbol in popular culture. The cowboy myth is all about simplicity, toughness, and endurance. What better food to embody that spirit than beans? Plain, unpretentious, but strong enough to keep a man alive. So, why did cowboys eat so many beans? Not because they loved them. Not because they were some kind of delicacy. They ate beans because they had to. Beans were cheap, they lasted forever, and they fueled the grueling work of cattle drives. But over time, beans became more than just food. They became part of the cowboy identity, a ritual at the fire, a symbol of endurance, and eventually, Hollywood cliché that stuck in our imagination. The next time you see that scene in a Western, where a cowboy stirs a pot of beans under the stars, you'll know it wasn't just a stereotype, it was history. Now, I'll throw the question back to you. If you had to eat the same food every single day on the trail, would you choose beans? Or would you roll the dice with spoiled meat, stale bread, or nothing at all? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm curious how many of you could survive on the cowboy diet. Well now, cowpokes, before we ride off into the sunset, here's the truth. This trail we're blazing together, just one fella, one laptop, and 1,000 AI wranglers I cooked up from scratch. I'm working day and night, polishing and tinkering, so we get the rowdiest, most closest to history ride through the early America days. Big thanks, y'all keep this trail rolling. See you on the next roundup.